So we're currently knee deep into Murders at Markup Manor spoiler season. And I made my full week 1 recap, you can check that in the link in the description. But there was a card that was recently spoiled that people are going insane over that I think people are totally wrong about. That card is Leyline of the Guildpact. But before I show you what that does, I'm going to take a minute to talk about the Leyline cycles. So there are 12 different cards in the Leyline cycle. It was a cycle that first appeared in Guildpact, so one of the first Ravnica sets. So it's pretty fitting that we come back to one here. And the whole cycle costs 2 generic and 2 of that color, so 2 white, 2 blue, 2 black, 2 red, or 2 green. And they all had the very important text of, if this Leyline is in your opening hand, you may begin the game with it on the battlefield. And this was like revolutionary. Magic had seen nothing like this at that point. But the thing with the cycle in Guildpact is that the entire cycle was pretty much hot garbage, except for one card. But I think WotC was scared that they were printing something too powerful because you could effectively get it for free. So they made all of the Leylines in that set just not very good. And so they printed a new cycle for M11 and then a third cycle for M20. And they did an interesting thing with the Leyline cycle. There have been 3 total renditions of the cycle at this point. And what they did is they did one for each color in each cycle. But when they figured out a design that they liked, that they nailed, they just kind of reprinted that for all the future cycles. So in this case, Leyline of the Void is the only black Leyline that exists. So the thing about Leylines is, because of the nature of them, they're best used as defensive or silver bullet cards. Because they're all 4 mana for not 4 mana worth effects, you risk putting a mediocre 4-drop, probably even bad 4-drop in your deck for the chance that if you get it in your opening hand, it's just free. And so like I mentioned, the best Leylines end up being silver bullet, like defensive cards. So for example, Leyline of the Void basically wins you the game against stuff like Hogak when it was legal and Dredge. Leyline of Sanctity basically wins you the game against burn decks, and it's also very, very good if you're on a combo deck and you're up against a Thoughtseize deck. Or, I guess if we're modernizing this, a Grief Scam deck. The problem with Leylines is when it comes to putting offensive effects on them. So for example, Leyline of Vitality is pretty bad, Leyline of the Meek is terrible, and Leyline of Lightning is horrendous. There are 2 offensive Leylines that are good. One of them is Leyline of Anticipation, which is basically only good in Commander. That's only for the reason that 4 mana is kind of the going rate for the all your cards have flash kind of effect. And Leyline of Abundance, this one they went a little bit overboard with it, and it's so powerful because it gives you such a strong mana advantage when you're running Mana Dorks that it's banned in Pioneer. So the thing about Leylines is that you need to want to do your thing fast, whether that's hating out your opponent's deck or enabling the combo for your deck. Because of that, they either do everything for you in the match that you want, or they are completely dead draws. Like, you wouldn't want to top deck a Leyline of the Void on turn 3 in your modern game. Or Leyline of Sanctity even on turn 2, because your opponent will have already Thoughtseized you or Grief Scammed you. And that brings us to our new card, Leyline of the Guildpact. It is a hybrid Selesnya, Simic, Golgari, or Gruul, so 4 mana total, for an enchantment with a Leyline text, so if it's in your opening hand, you can begin the game with it on the battlefield. And the 2 lines of text are, each non-land permanent you control is all colors, and lands you control are every basic land type in addition to the other types. So the Pioneer implications of this card are interesting. I'm not a Pioneer expert, so I could be wrong on this, but I still don't think it's very good. People are talking about this card in conjunction with Nykthos Shrine to Nyx, mono green being one of the predominant decks of Pioneer pretty much since its inception. It gives you 4 free green devotion if it's on the battlefield, but I still just don't think that's worth running a do-nothing card in your deck. Am I wrong? I personally, looking at it right now, I don't think that's good enough to justify a 4 mana do-nothing enchantment in your Pioneer deck. But I'm going to go over the EDH implications of this, because once again, it's what the channel is about. And people think this card is good. I disagree. I think this card is like actively terrible. So let me just say why Leylines aren't very good in EDH. Because of the thing I mentioned earlier, 4 mana is just way overcosted for its effects. And there are 2 exceptions, one of them being Leyline of Anticipation. And the Anticipation used to be kind of a good stuff card, but now it's kind of been relegated to only being played in decks where your commander has a once each turn and on any turn clause. And Leyline of Abundance, which is pretty much only put in either Mana Dork tribal decks or decks where your commander lets your creatures tap for mana. So these are only played in those specific decks, and they're only good in those specific decks because those effects are worth paying the 4 mana for in those decks. We need to assume we're going to be paying 4 mana for these, because in a standard 60 card format, if you have 60 cards in your deck and 4 copies of each Leyline, you have a 40% chance of having one in your opening hand. But obviously, because this is Commander, we have 100 or 99 cards in our decks and only one copy of each card. So that 40% chance goes all the way down to 7. So because of that, we have to assume that we are paying 4 mana for this card. And if we assume that, because that is most likely what's going to happen, this card is like terrible. It's so bad. Like the second part, it doesn't give you any card advantage or mana advantage. It's double the cost of Prismatic Omen, which is the same effect, and it's 1 more mana than both Chromatic Lantern and Dryad of the Elysian Grove. If you play either of those, you get a 1 mana cost reduction, and you can either get a rock that haps for mana, or you can get an additional land every single turn. Okay, so the second part is bad, right? What about the first part? So there are 5 commanders that care about your cards being either a lot of colors or all colors. And the 5-color Omnath and Niv Mizzet Reborn both care about your cards being 5 colors in their library. And Ramos and Jensen Catholian both only care about your cards being 5 colors while they're on the stack. So the first part of the card is basically flavor text for those 2 decks. Let's talk about the 5th commander I'm talking about, Jared Cartholian. See, this is the only deck that this card even has a chance of being good in. But here's the thing. If you're playing this, we have to assume that you have a high enough density of creatures that are only 1 to 2 colors. Maybe, I don't know, 15 to 20. And in that situation, if you don't draw the Leyline, aren't you just fucked? So because of that, we're going to assume we don't ever draw this Leyline in the game. So therefore, you'd want to be building your deck full of just like 4 to 5 color creatures anyway, which defeats the purpose of the Leyline in general. So I mean, I guess you could put this in if you want, but I still think this card is just hot trash, even in Jared, which is the only commander that could possibly want this card. So in conclusion, I think people get a little bit too hyped during spoiler season and they see a 5-color card with a really weird mana cost and the traditionally powerful text of each land is every single land type and get a little bit confused and caught up in the hype of spoiler season. But they read the Prismatic Omen text and think that it's going to make the hardest part of building their 5-color deck, which is fixing, easier, which it will, but it's also way too expensive and way too clunky for what it is. Like if it had the Painter Servant text where it said like each card in your library and in the graveyard and not on the battlefield are all colors, then I think we'd be talking, but it doesn't. And as this card is printed, I think it's stone unplayable in 99.99% of EDH decks. Once again, Pioneer, we're talking a different story. So what do you think? What do you think about this Leyline? Do you think it's cool? Do you think it's trash? Let me know down in the comments below. Let's have a conversation. Do all the YouTube bullshit, like, comment, subscribe. And if you're interested in checking out the first week worth of Murder at Karlov Manor spoilers, I got you right here. Check it out. See you later. Have a good one.